Hello. This is Jeff here with True Crime Myths, Legends, and more. And you would think the more that I did this, the more that I would figure out how this technology works and actually be able to get myself back up on screen after I shut off the intro. But 25 episodes in, I still haven't figured it out. And we'll see what happens over the next 100. So thank you guys for joining us here. We have another incredible guest today. I know we're getting a little bit of a late start, and I will be posting this right after. So sorry, guys, you'll get it a little bit late today, but it'll be good, I promise. So we have the author of 50 Shades of True Crime, uh, Doug Fifer here. Hopefully, I pronounced his name right. I'm also not good at names. But Doug Fifer is a retired Alaskan police officer who specialized in crime scene analysis, deviant sexual crimes, hostage negotiations, and various special assignments throughout his 25-year career. As a highly decorated investigator, Doug has negotiated with serial killers, solved homicides, and worked real-life cases that will shock you to the core. He started in law enforcement with the Anchorage Police Department in 1996 and retired in 2021. Born in the small town of Homer, Alaska, Doug and his wife, Kim, raised their children in the Anchorage area. His family originates from southeast Alaska, mainly around the Ketchikan area. He is well, I should have asked this one beforehand. You'll have to give it to me in a minute. He is a Lingit Indian, maybe close. Close enough. He's nodding at me, and heavily connected to his Alaskan native culture and heritage. Doug and Kim are also avid audiophiles who started a wine business in Anchorage in 2007. Alaskans have a passionate love for the outdoors, and the Fifer family is no exception. Fishing, hiking, snowboarding, and extreme sports top their list. Their family dog, Malbec, is considered one of the kids and so snowboards a bit too. My wife also used to snowboard, being from California. As the author of 50 Shades of True Crime, Doug brings to life stories so bizarre, so intense, and so twisted that the reader will be left speechless. This is not your run-of-the-mill true crime. It is straight from the source, an author-led journey into how far some will go to achieve their sexually freakish desires. You'll never read a book quite like this one. And even the table of contents got me laughing. It was good. It's a cringe-worthy reality check on humanity. You might think you can handle the truth, but this cop's truth is as savage as it gets. When asked about the stressors of being a cop, Doug replied, "Humor plays a key role in keeping your sanity, not just in law enforcement, but in life in general." His writing certainly reflects this philosophy, as Doug believes in taking life seriously, just not too seriously. So let's welcome Doug here to the show. I'll bring him up now. Hey, Doug, how's it going, man?
Hi, Jeff. I'm fantastic. How you doing?
Fantastic, man. All the way from Alaska. I was looking in the one of the little marketing things for the book says who has the most serial killers per capita, and it is Alaska.
It is Alaska. It's something that we don't want to be champions of, but unfortunately we are. That's probably not a cool thing to have, but per capita, we have the most serial killers on planet Earth, which is very strange. A couple of things in the intro. You hit my name just perfect. Tlingit Indian. So almost take the TL like a K. Don't ask me why, but it's Tlingit. But everything else, you were spot on.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. I try, and
Very good.
I'm not always very successful at it. So I think I was looking at that earlier, and I thought about that. Alaska having per capita the most serial killers in the world is interesting, and I think that personally, I think it has a lot to do with that. It's a great place to hide, and it's a place where we don't really realize it's obviously the largest state, not in a continuous U.S., but it is the largest state. It's bigger than Texas. You have to fly everywhere to get any place in Alaska, so it's a great place to hide, but it's also a difficult place to get out of. Like how do you get somewhere when you got to disappear? So
Yeah, a couple good points there. So Alaska, you said bigger than Texas. It's 2.5 times the size of Texas. It's absolutely massive. Beautiful place. I tell people it's the most beautiful on earth, but also one of the most deadliest. Again, we have a population of about 700,000 total for such a vast area. So with serial killers, what's unique is obviously disposing of bodies, being anonymous, having areas to hide at. Probably very good for them in their mindset. So we get a lot of transient serial killers from the lower 48 that come up, continue committing their crimes. They also are mistaken that Alaska is not sophisticated in their law
mm,
enforcement or police work. Couldn't be farther from the truth, but they don't know that. So luckily, we end up catching most of them. But I think that's unique. I think it is that lure of Alaska's dark, vast, private. So serial killers it's a natural draw for them.
yeah, yeah. When you have a state that is spends at least 3 months of the year in complete darkness, it seems like it's a good way to cover up any kind of crimes that have to be done under cover of darkness.
Yeah, it's a good thought by them from a criminal standpoint because very hard to prosecute a homicide without a body.
Yeah,
So if we can't find the body, it's difficult. Again, serial killers are unique, multiple victims. So eventually, hopefully, you catch them. Not always. I mean, I worked a case where there were several torso killings, and by torsos, I mean that's all that was left of the individual
yeah,
females. We never caught that perpetrator. So either he moved out, continued his killing elsewhere, he died, or he's incarcerated for some other crime. That case always haunts me because what happened to that person? I say he. I do that on purpose because it's 98% of serial killers are men.
yeah.
So I anticipate that individual killing women was a man. But again, that's something in Alaska that's quite unique. It's so vast, I can only imagine how many bodies are in the last frontier because most of these places aren't inhibited. There's no towns or cities around it. And you can take snow machine places, you can fly places that are very discreet. So I'm sure we have a lot of bodies we haven't discovered.
Yeah, it's similar to the to going out to like Vegas, where you have hundreds of miles of desert, and the old saying has always been that there's a lot of holes dug in that desert. A lot of people buried out there that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of that is perpetrated by the organized crime here in the states, because that's where all the mafia was, and they were digging holes out there and leaving people.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's got to be a bunch. We still got to find Jimmy Hoffa. We got to find out where he's at.
Absolutely. I still think he's in the foundations of the stadium.
That's what they say too. That'd be hard to find for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'd be interested. You would think that eventually someone would say something, but most of the people in that circumstance are all gone. There's of course Traficante is really really prominent. All of that from down in Florida, and I don't think we'll ever know. And very similar to a lot of the conspiracy theories. And eventually, I will get to write that volume of my book and talk about the conspiracy theories and assassinations and stuff. With JFK and the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. I think is fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of material there, and like you said, it's hard to solve nowadays. Even on a current homicide, there's a show called 48 Hours. I'm sure your listeners have seen that. That there's a lot of truth to that. If we don't get a lead within the first 48 hours, almost those solve rates are almost cut in half. That's how quick you have to get on that case. So when you take decades and decades later, nearly impossible.
Yeah, yeah. It comes down to somebody's grandfather has to leave something in the attic,
Yep.
and have written down a bunch of things, or somebody stumbles upon their collection of driver's licenses or something, and like, what the hell is this? How did he get all these women's panties up in this drawer?
Yep.
You know, and it's wild. So Alaska has had several killers that that most of us are familiar with, of course, starting with like Israel Keys, and then you have the Butcher Baker up there, Robert Hansen. They're probably the two most famous. up there, but you have a ton of them that you talk about in your book.
Yeah, I do. I go in depth in some of the serial killers. The Robert Hansen, the one you talked about, called the Butcher Baker. He was a Alaskan baker. That's where he got the name. He was quite unique and smart in his habits. He owned his own airplane at Merrill Field, one of our small runways. So he would actually kidnap females, mostly prostitutes, fly them out remote to the bush, and then execute them. One, you don't have any witnesses, you don't have any cameras. I mean, pretty smart. What happened on that one is we had an Anchorage police officer that was an avid hunter that was actually out hunting, moose hunting, and discovered one of the bodies. It was so remote that we initially focused upon our own police officer, thinking that maybe he had something to do with the murders, right? Because if you had a police officer doing serial killings, boy, it'd be hard to find to
Yeah.
uncover. Turns out it was purely by happen chance. And then one of the females was able to break away at Merrill Field, partially duct taped, where Hansen was, attending to his airplane before he took off, ran into traffic, got help, and that's kind of how that case spiraled. Absolutely fascinating because how long would he have got away with that if she wouldn't have broke out of the airplane? Because there was no clues out in the wild.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Israel Keys, which is another phenomenal story. Pure psychopath on his end, most serial killers are. And then one that I dealt with personally as a hostage negotiator when he took two hostages before we finally arrested him was Joshua Wade, who could be good for up to 15 homicides in total.
Wow. Yeah. Israel Keys is always interesting to me because, people have this idea of how incredibly intelligent Keys was. And, there are all these books and documentaries done around that idea. And I always kind of take the standpoint like he couldn't have been that smart if he got caught the way that he did. And, yes, he was meticulous in the way that he planned things. He was he definitely went for the long plan, and he buried things and went back and forth and went from different states and had these different buckets planted in all these places to commit his crimes. But does that really mean that there was a lot of yes, there's a lot of forethought there, but that doesn't necessarily. It obviously didn't work very long for him.
Yeah. So you bring up a great point, Jeff. So I'm going to disagree with you only slightly. Serial killers that I've interacted with, Israel Keys, Joshua Wade, and others, I find them extremely intelligent. But I'll put a caveat to your point on how we get there. Is in the interviews, especially take Israel Keys. In that interview, he would go outside to commit homicides knowing he wouldn't get caught. Very meticulous. He knew never to commit a homicide in Alaska because we would trace it back to him. But what he said in the interviews, and I think this is very key, and it goes to that lack of intelligence getting caught that you point out, is it's a brain disease. So he admits this, he could no longer control his own urges in his brain, even though he knew it was wrong to do and he might get caught. It overtook him. So it wasn't necessarily a lack of intelligence. Again, I liken the brain to any organ, your heart, your liver, your lungs, where it can become diseased. Their brains are in fact diseased. They're not hardwired correctly. So intelligence, I found that they operate very high, but eventually that brain takes over and forces them into situations they just can't stop. So it's give and take. But in my interviews, especially with Joshua Wade, negotiating with him one-on-one, I found him extremely intelligent to the point where I wish that these individuals would go off and be productive citizens because they would be business executives or they would do very well. They just can't control it, and that's where they go off the rails. So that's my experience is that, unfortunately, they operate at a high IQ.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because what we find is that many of the super successful business people are all psychopathic, right? They have these psychopathic traits that really force them to be able to hyper focus on the things that they need to focus on so that they can be successful. But when we look at these different killers, we find that they're impulse control and being able to fight those urges that they have uh eventually catches up with them, and that ultimately is what their downfall is because they're not able to get away from that. Like when we look at somebody like Dennis Rader, who is somebody that I talk to, Dennis is a very intelligent guy, but he used that and tried to, flaunt that to the police. And eventually that got him in a lot of trouble because,
Yeah.
technology is constantly changing. The police are always several steps ahead, trying to figure that out and trying to anticipate those things. And, the classic, you know, well, you guys can't trace this floppy disk. Uh, nah. Well, and it's funny because he just messaged me a couple weeks ago and said that he was celebrating his 20-year anniversary in prison. And I'm thinking, well, there
Well,
you go.
yeah. I wouldn't celebrate that, but
Yeah,
again, different brain, different than ours. Yeah.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
technology, from your listeners, I think cameras, cell phones. I mean, it's just changed the game. I think it's extremely. You almost have to be a little bit lucky nowadays to get away with homicide, and it's becoming more and more rare with technology. So I do see that it's hard. I mean, you can't even walk out of your neighborhood without being captured by 15 ring cameras, right?
Yeah,
Because everybody has it. It's so accessible. And if you take your cell phone anywhere, even if you think it's off, it's never really off. And we'll trace and ping towers that you're in the location. So it does surprise me on the how beneficial technology is to law enforcement. And then we go to DNA. The beautiful thing of DNA is now I don't need your DNA, Jeff. If any of your families in the registries for ancestry.com, all those, I can trace back to you and make you a likely suspect. And then I can get a warrant or find your DNA outside of a McDonald's, your trash, whatever, and then link you to that homicide. So that's been extremely beneficial to law enforcement as well.
yeah, yeah. I know that, like in the John Benet Ramsey case, they're still working to try to get access to some of that ancestry DNA, so that they can see if there was an intruder. In fact, if the DNA that was at the scene was somebody else's, because they've already determined that it was not the family. None of their DNA appeared. None of the relatives appeared. So yeah, it's wild how much that changes things. And then you have this is amazing to me, and I tell people this all the time when I'm talking specifically about serial killer psychology and things. You know, it is even down to the fact that if you go and you buy something that looks a little bit strange at Walmart, there are 7 million cameras and they can pinpoint the exact time that you bought anything in that store, when you came, when you left, what you were driving when you left there. And it's next to impossible to go and to do that. There's such an incredible paper trail, even if you're using credit cards or debit cards or whatever. uh, it's incredibly difficult to get away with that kind of crime.
Yeah, I agree. And you and I are never going to kill somebody, so we're probably pretty safe. But to those that are going to, I think it's becoming harder and harder, which is a good thing. But
Yeah,
again, technology goes both ways, right? With AI, you can start manipulating video footage. So criminals will always find a way. I mean, I've always been fascinated in my law enforcement career. Once I think we've got technology on our side, they develop something on their side that they use. So you never know, actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is amazing. We're finally at that place with AI that things can be created that look so real and that can fool people so easily. Um, whether it is, people could take this video and have us saying something completely different. And it's very, very easy to do that with the technology that we have now. All they need is a few words and they can, render something that is nearly indistinguishable. So and these people that are, deciding that they want to do these kinds of crimes have nothing but time. Like that's all they're doing. So they have plenty of time to figure it out and work on the different schemes that they have. And they've been doing it for hundreds of years.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, AI is good for us now, but it will be used against law enforcement, no doubt. Simply, alibis we go on. What were you doing at the time of the murder, Jeff? The technology is here to create a video where you're, 200 miles away at a coffee shop, caught on camera. Those type of things will happen inevitably with technology and the criminal mind. It's probably happening now. We just don't know about it, but we'll see how moving forward, see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what that role plays in, court cases that are coming up. I know that, here in the States, not too far from me, not too long ago, they arrested a gentleman in a connection with murdering two children. And they had some camera footage that one of the girls took. And however, uh, the footage is not good. It does not really, to me, it doesn't point. And this is a layman. When you look at that, it could literally be anybody in the Indiana area. Like everybody's got a Carhartt jacket, a beanie, and a pair of jeans. It's kind of the natural dress in the Midwest. So, to have that and to say that it's any specific person is very difficult. And there's no DNA at the scene. There was actually there were other people's DNA at the scene. And then you mentioned this earlier, which is really interesting that has come out. But in the court case, they never did get the phone data and didn't show what was pinging at the towers. Well, since the case and since the conviction, they have determined that there were three people in the crime scene area during the times that they believe that this murder happened. And none of them happened to be the guy that they convicted, which is very, very interesting. One of them happened to be the guy who owned the property. And then there are two other cell phones that ping there similar times. So it's always been interesting. Who are the other two people that were there
Yeah.
in the area during the commission of this crime? So it'll be interesting to see when this comes up for appeal if they're able to retrieve that data and really be able to get a sense of who these people were. And there have been several people that have confessed to the crime since then. Now, these are jail confessions, so
Sure.
they only have so much weight. But it'll be interesting to see because all of the people so far that have been implicated uh, seem to go in line with those confessions that were made before the murders or before the trial. So I'll be interested to see what happens and what the lawyers are currently working on. But that is all in the hands of them. So
Yeah, sounds like a fascinating case. I'd have to dig deep into the case file, watch the video to give a determination because I don't know about the case, but
yeah,
sounds interesting. You did mention DNA. I will say for your listeners, back when DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid, we all have it, makes up our individual forms. Back in the day, that was game over for law enforcement, meaning of Jeff, if we found your DNA at a crime scene, you're convicted. That's all the jury ever needed. And I
yeah,
thought forever that would be the case. What happened is I found this out in my career and subsequent convictions that were overturned is criminals adjusted and easily plant DNA to other DNA at crime scenes, right? In fact, I did a graduate paper and it was called The Fallacy of DNA once I learned this. So I went into one of our local clubs in Alaska and I was able to get 6 different sources of DNA in a public gym facility that I could have used, obviously, to plan in crime scenes. And then I dictated a case in Thailand where it was a prostitute with her pimp that planted DNA on herself from a suspect that didn't, and then the pimp actually killed her, planted the DNA. He was convicted. Turned out he didn't do the crime. He was never even with the girl. So those things, AI will do similar to that, just what DNA has done. So no single piece of evidence a jury should ever convict an individual of. It's got to be the totality. But juries were kind of convinced that if your DNA was there, you did it. Turns
yep,
out that, and I'm sure a majority of the time that is the case, but it's not 100%. You have to have other evidence as well.
yeah. Of course, this is a huge case that uh, my co-hosts have a lot of opinions about, and I'm sure as soon as they hear this, they'll be like, "Jeff, I can't believe you brought that up." But of course, the biggest case that we have here in the states is the OJ case. They had plenty of DNA evidence that it was him and that he cut his hand and his blood was at the scene with the two victims, and that ended up not being a thing. Ultimately, he got off. I have a guy that wants to come on that to talk about that and to talk about how he does not believe that OJ did it. and was an advocate against his conviction or against the court case. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that I didn't realize this before. And one of the great things about this podcast is I'm always learning so much from my guests and everything and talking to everybody. And not that my opinion has changed because I haven't heard the evidence yet, but there are a lot of people that believe it was OJ's son that did it, that he had a beef with Nicole and Ron Goldman, and that he actually got there before and OJ tried to cover it up. I don't know how true that is. I don't know how much evidence there is to support that, but it's an interesting theory. It's not one that I've heard before. And you know, it's just fascinating that a lot that those things could happen. Even in the Delphi case, one of the only DNA that they found at the crime scene was actually of the sister. And you know, then they were trying to figure out, okay, well, how did that DNA get there? It was from a strand of hair that was grasped in one of the girl's hands. And so they found that hair. They assumed that it had to be the killer because, you know, how would this be? Or at least from the other girl. And what they eventually surmised is that it must have come, she must have borrowed her sweatshirt. And the hair was in the sweatshirt, and she at some point clutched it in her hand and it got wrapped around her hand. You know, completely plausible if she took her sister's sweatshirt that there would be hair in the hood or something. But the one big thing in that case that the jury actually said was not a factor, but it really seemed to be during the trial that it was a factor was a gun case. There was a bullet casing that was found, an unspent bullet under one of the shoes of the girls. And when they went and they did the analysis of that bullet, it had markings on it as if it was ejected from the gun. Now they never could replicate that in the lab. The only way that they could replicate it is by firing a similar 9mm to get the same markings. Well, anybody who owns a gun and you know actively goes out and shoots knows that those markings are not the same from a spent cartridge and from an ejected cartridge.
Sure.
So the science that they used was really junk science. And when it came out later on, one of the jurors came out and said that they really threw that out, that that was not a factor at all to them because they understood that it couldn't be accurate. And but what's crazy is immediately after the case, they destroyed the gun and the bullet. So there's no way to go back and retest any of that and to see if any of the other uh, guns that may have been a factor on the one guy's property. You know, he had a 9mm there. They never went and tested that. They only tested this one gun that they found in the suspect's house. So it's there's a lot of things with that case that were not done well.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my point, both on the OJ case and where you're at on this. Is I worked crime scene response for many, many years, and that's a team of cops that go out if there's a homicide, a really suspicious missing person that's likely a homicide. We'll go out and forensically map that crime scene and document everything. Although I didn't work for LAPD in the OJ Simpson case, if I had to guess based on the blood evidence, I would guess that OJ's the likely suspect. What I would say is that that crime scene was processed very poorly. The whole documentation by LAPD in that, I know it's a high profile case, but every murder must be handled the same every way. The Anchorage Police Department's very good at it. You might go out for 24 to 36 hours straight, document every piece of evidence. You have to for these things. It wasn't done well, and that led to the jury acquitting on those. And in fairness, like you said, with the gun that was destroyed, if those things happen and cops make a mistake, then the juries need to acquit because the preponderance of the evidence must be there. If it's not, you've got to let the individual go. Even if they may have committed the crime, it still has to be proven. That's the way our judicial system works, and that's the best way it should work. So a lot of it is mistakes by police, not on purpose. It's timing, it's grueling to do these cases. So you have hiccups, you have a lot of cops out there, a lot of different departments, but you got to be very meticulous on homicides because you got one shot. So if you screw it up, that individual is going free.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, as you're saying that, all I could think of is if the glove don't fit, you must have quit.
Yeah. A lot of mistakes there. Yeah.
So I've never shown this on camera before, but this is pretty cool. Oh, you can't see it on the thing here. Anyway,
It's
it
got to
is
be an
my
OJ card.
it is. It's my
Yep.
sign. It's my signed OJ Simpson card.
Wow. Where did you buy it or did you get him to sign it?
No, I bought it,
You bought it? Okay.
but yeah,
Yeah.
that is part of my collection. It's it's wild. I can't believe I got my hands on that. Somebody folded it in half, but it's okay. It's an OJ Simpson signed card.
Now, Jeff, you're not like Dexter where you got a lot of memorabilia of killers and things like that at home, do you?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I have my fair share.
All right. Okay.
It's funny because I was sitting here earlier and I said I have shadow boxes and stuff that I do, and I go out and actually it was my co-host that suggested this. They were like, Jeff, you're going out to all these true crime locations and stuff. You should go and like take videos and I do a quick little video telling the history of the location, and
Yeah.
then I grab 8 ounces of dirt, and I have little shadow boxes with vials of dirt that I sell to people because everybody wants a little piece. It's amazing.
I never thought of that. That's actually a great plan and not a bad idea on your part. So that's pretty cool. I will tell you on serial killers particularly is when you watch on TV that they have trinkets, they keep momentums. That's that's absolutely true.
Yep.
Everyone, when we get those search warrants for their houses later or wherever they're at, you find these things that they kept, whether it's a necklace, something that reminds them of the crime, almost inevitably. Israel Keys, Joshua Wade, doesn't matter who it is. I always found that fascinating. I mean, from a human psyche perspective, I get it, right? It's that power they want to relive.
Yeah.
But they do. They all have their own little collection.
I know this is really weird, but when I was in college, I was at I used to go to these conventions and stuff way back then. And I remember at one specific convention, we were there, and a bunch of the guys that are with were vegan. And this is before veganism was popular. And so all they could eat was French fries and ketchup. And so we were in like a Hilton or something, and so they ordered these plates of French fries and they delivered them up to the room, and they had these little bottles of Heinz ketchup.
Yep.
I still have those bottles of Heinz ketchup. I have them in a box somewhere that I grabbed from there all that time ago just to remember that event.
Wow.
And it's just when I look at that and when I see, these people that go and commit these crimes, and I understand about myself personally that I do the same thing, right? When I want to memorialize something, when I want to remember that event, I always find something to take as a trinket or to have so that I can remember that. I went to the Bell Witch Cave and I walked out of the cave and I happened to look down and I found a rock that was broken open with a little geode inside of it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I took that and it's sitting up on my shelf right now. And it's it's just amazing. Of course, that wasn't, I didn't kill anybody to get that memory. But people for thousands of years have been going to locations and, the Berlin Wall and, Bathory's castles and, things like that, and wanting to take back a little piece so
Sure.
that they could remember that event in their life.
Yeah,
It's just,
that part's normal, but I'm glad you say you didn't kill anybody because my investigator senses were coming up. I was going to have an interview with you, Jeff, but I think we're safe now.
yeah. I hope so. Anyway, I've got a lot of weird shit in here.
Yeah.
Like I look right above me right now, and I have a 1913 program from P.T. Barnum's sideshow, and so it has like Billy Wells and Grace Gilbert, the bearded lady, and it
Wow.
has all their bios on it.
Yeah.
So I have been a collector of the weird and odd for some time.
All right. Well, I don't mind collecting stuff. My wife throws it out if it's older than 2 days, so it won't work for me.
So, at writing your book, because your book is, it is, in this industry, you have to have a lot of humor. There is a lot of darkness. One of the things that I've been working on, and some people know this, I've been working on a role playing game called Killers Shadows of the Mind. It should come out next month, but part of it is you can play as a detective, you can play as a forensic specialist, or you can play as one of 6 different killer types. And one of the things in the game, because we want to keep it as real as possible, is as you're going through and investigating these crimes, there are some sanity things that happen. And so you have to roll sanity checks because as you're seeing this horrific stuff and experiencing these, your sanity gets lower and lower. You end up finding yourself in the depths of this depravity, and that changes people. If you can't find a way through that and find a way to deal with that, often with therapy or things like that, you really get into a bad place. You can only experience so much of the nastiness of the people around us, and not get caught up in that. I experienced that. I mean, other than my own childhood, I experienced that when I worked for the state, because I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice, and then I also worked as a corrections officer for some time. And just being in that mix with those people and dealing with all of their bullshit all the time certainly changes your perspective on life. It makes you a much harder person, and it makes it very easy to look at all of the negative things and all of those possibilities. So we all have to have a way to kind of pull ourselves out of that. Some people do that through humor. Some people do that through getting out into nature and, doing yoga or, meditating or whatever it is. But we have to find that balance because it's so easy to get locked into all of that craziness that's happening.
Yeah, it's a great point. I talk about that in the book as well. The book, it opens up with a chapter called Name That Crime. And what that is the readers will see a picture or a crime scene photo, then they'll have 3 or 4 criminal statutes. They'll kind of try and pick which one may relate to that photograph, and then you'll read the story and find out how close you were. And then it progressively amps up in sexual deviant crimes as we go through the book. But I'll sprinkle some humor in there. We call it cop dark humor, like you were talking about. When I worked crime scene for many, many years, and I'm not even making this up, I would tell my wife, all I see is dead people, right? That's all my calls were dead people. And that weighs on you because you're not interacting with normal people every day. You're working these horrific crime scenes. So cops use that dark humor, not to demean the victim, not to make fun of a potential suspect, but really for self-survival. So we joke amongst ourselves just to get through those rough moments. I was always very good, and I think most cops that survive a career can work their shift and then go home and turn into family man or whatever you do, switch it off. Some can't, and those cops either have a difficult career or they don't survive. So I think sprinkling that humor helps it a little bit, and that's throughout the book. It's not corny humor, it's not too much, but I throw it in there for your readers and listeners just to give them a little bit of break and also to give them a perspective from a cop's standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, I think one of the things you have a chapter in there that touches on necrophilia, which I thought was really interesting because it and a chapter on bestiality, which is maybe an Alaskan thing. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess the sheep down here get their fair share, I guess.
yeah, both are. I know that while they happen in Alaska, obviously, I think it's not only U.S. wide, it's worldwide. And I put some of those numbers in the book. It'll be astonishing for your readers to see how prolific it is. Sadly, so bestiality is sex with animals. So there's a chapter on that and some critical cases that happen in Alaska. The necrophilia is sex with dead people. Serial killers, particularly, are guilty of this. Again, it's all about power to them. So they're re-victimizing their victims and enjoying that power. Israel Keys in our interviews led us towards necrophilia, and that was with one of the victims he had in Alaska. He was so savage that he had put her in an outside shed for 2 months, or for a month in February, which is our coldest month. Can get 20 below in February. Went on a cruise, came back, thawed the body back out, and then intimated to having sexual intercourse with the body again. That's beyond perverse. I mean, in a normal like psyche, it's fascinating. But serial killers, whether it's Ted Bundy, any of them, are pervasive towards necrophilia. And again, it's that power. It's not about the sex, even though it's biological. It's about dominating the victim, dead or alive.
Dude, one of the things that when I was writing my book, And when I covered Dahmer in there, and I talked about that chapter, there is a point in where he's at his grandmother's house, and he has one of his victims, and he is actively having sexual intercourse with this dead victim for I think up to a week. And he got to the place where he finally said that it was so disgusting, even for him, that he had to stop. And I've always thought about that, and I've always thought, how do you get to a place when, for you as the guy who is killing these people and doing this, when do you get to that? When do you cross the line? Like it's so like outside of my understanding of reality, that could be okay for any period of time, let alone with a decomposing body that is starting to fester and stink, and it's just so wild. The same thing with oh, I forget what his name is now. Oh my goodness, I can't think of it. He was up uh, in England, but he was like the British Jeffrey Dahmer.
Gotcha.
Did very very similar things, and he just died not too long ago. And somebody sold a pair of his glasses that I knew. But anyway, he did a similar thing. He had cut up all the bodies and had torsos in his living room and everything, and he had a thing for laying down with the dead bodies and stuff, because whenever he could only get excited when, like, he would often powder himself up so that he looked at himself when he was masturbating, as he was one of the corpses, and just like stuff that just crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so in my book,
Dennis Nielsen.
Nielsen,
There we
okay.
go.
Well,
Yeah.
the Green River Killer, which was in Washington, Oregon, he would have post sex with modem with his victims, and he would only stop. He's quote unquote when the flies came around. So the multiple days after. I mean, this thought process. But there's fetishes and paraphilias in my book.
Yeah.
Fetishes might be where you bought little bondage, you and your wife, whatever role playing. It's a fetish where it doesn't really hurt anybody. It's your kind of kink, whatever you like. And then there's paraphilias, which is necrophilia. That's where you harm somebody else or yourself in that sexual gratification. So paraphilias are very bad. They come in all gamuts. I talk about most of them in my book. Those are extreme cases, but I document them all. Fetishes are maybe something that you like or you don't like, but doesn't necessarily harm anybody else. So that's the extreme difference there, and that's where these necrophiliacs are.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I saw that somebody posted recently, uh, and I would not consider him a necrophiliac, but apparently he has been classified that way. But Ed Gein, and there's a lot of talk about Gein now because of the new show that's getting ready to come out, Monster. They're doing a season on Ed Gein, and Charlie Hunnam is playing Gein. Gein is an interesting case because he is influenced so much of our pop culture here in the states, and movies after movie he's influenced. But when you really look into the case, Gein was never a cannibal, like many of the movies have portrayed him as. He, as far as we know, and as far as he ever admitted, he never had sex with any of the bodies. He certainly was a grave robber. He dug up things. He did make a pair of pants out of somebody's flesh. But short of that, a lot of the myths around Ed Gein are not true. He didn't have lampshades in his house. He did have a chair that had some human skin on it. It was about, I don't know, a 3 by 2 inch spot that he had a little bit of human skin on. He did have a can full of vulvas and things like that. But of course, this idea of creating a woman suit and becoming his mother, that led to the idea of Psycho and Buffalo Bill, were thoughts that he had, but not things that were actually realized in any grand scale. So it's fascinating that he has gotten this moniker as this flesh eating necrophiliac, uh, and the history really doesn't support that.
Yeah, I think that's common with any case. 70% is going to be true, and then you get 30% of fluff with, even with the docuseries, true crimes you see. I think and then people talk more and more about it, and things that aren't true become true. So I agree with you on necrophilia. There's three types of necrophilia. There's fantasy necrophilia, there's normal necrophilia, and there's homicidal necrophilia. Fantasy necrophilia, I had an interesting case in Alaska. I would often talk to ladies of the night, working girls, when I was on patrol, because they would know everything that happened in your town. They know
Absolutely.
criminals, robberies, homicide suspects. I wouldn't bust them for what they were doing. I would just want information and become cordial with them. Well, one of them told me about a John that she didn't like. She just offered this to me. He would pay her to have sex, but she'd have to pretend that she was dead, not breathing. Eventually, he brought her to her house when her wife and kids were away on vacation because he wanted to have sex in their bed. The wife didn't like it because she thought it was weird and made fun of him. So to get back at his wife, he's going to have sex with a prostitute, necrophilia style, in the bed. Never harmed her, never did anything, but he only fantasized about it. Whether he ever acted on that in the future, I don't know. But that's weird as hell to get a prostitute to play dead, but that's what he did. Normal necrophilia is categorized as those who look for opportunities. They might work at a morgue, a cemetery, where they don't kill the victims, but they find them in certain states and have sex with the corpses. There's nothing normal about it, but that's how it's classified. And then homicidal, which are your serial killers, some of them specifically kill to have sex with the corpse. That's their intention. They're not picking you out because they don't like you. For some other reason, their intention is to have sex with you. So three categories. It's fascinating, the progression. I don't know if fantasy leads to homicidal. There's not enough data out there. It's a taboo subject. But I do go in depth in my book on some of these serial killers, on what they've done to bodies post-mortem. Again, you and I think as normal humans, it's hard to even fathom why they would do this, but they do it.
Yeah. One of the things that I've always been very interested in, and it seems to play itself out, and you just mentioned it, is this kind of fantasy idea of these serial killers. And in all of them, you see this building and this mounting of this fantasy life that they're constantly trying to fulfill, whatever it is, whether it's the act of murdering somebody, whether it is the sex with the corpse or whatever. And there is not we all think that these crimes are all sex related. They're not. There are many serial murders that are done that don't really have a sexual implication, but
Sure.
all of them that I've looked at all have some kind of fantasy life that they're trying to build and they're trying to meet. They're trying to get that perfect picture of whatever it is in their mind, and they will not stop until they either get to that or they get caught, one or the other. And it's fascinating to try to understand somebody from that perspective. uh you know what does that look like? Why can we not control those desires and those fantasy urges? Why do they lead to these deviant crimes?
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't have an easy answer other than I think the brain can be diseased or hardwired incorrectly, just like any other organ in the body. So sadly, some of these are born, whether they're made in the environment. I don't have enough to give a guess there. I will say you keyed on it, that serial killers, until they're stopped, that's 100% true. So a lot of people will ask me on homicides and sexual predators, hey, how about if we get them some help? Sadly, in my experience in 25 years, I've never seen a severe sexual predator be rehabilitated. They've always, and I mean 100% of the time, reoffended in some form or fashion. So they must be incarcerated. Other criminals, you commit a robbery, a burglary, of course, get them some help, straighten out their lives. These individuals, when your brain's not right, it's hard to fix that by saying you should be normal and live in society. We're going to give you a job, a career. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I hear that a lot, and I explain that's the reason, is because that type of crime, individual, that suspect, you just can't slap them in and give them some counseling for a month and they're going to change their behavior. Doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure. That is one of the things. Even with many of those people, you look at their lives and they go through these cycles of regret, these cycles of suicide and things because of the things that they're dealing with. But the problem is they can never really get away from that because they're going to offend somehow.
Yep.
And because that fantasy is so real for them, they can't escape it. And when it becomes right again, they're going to take that opportunity to go and try to live out that fantasy, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct.
Yeah, it's it you know, you mentioned earlier, and I thought it was really interesting, is that, and I tried to really highlight this in my own writing, is that a lot of these people, like when you watch the documentaries and things like that, there is a lot of things that are inaccurate in there, and that is why we get these different killers that get this almost mythological status within our society, because we're watching it, we're trying to understand it, and we build up all these things that may have a little bit of basis in truth, but very little, and they become something that they were never meant to be.
Yeah, that's why I think, police reports, the actual evidence documented, that's always pretty reliable. Sadly, the public doesn't always see all of that, even in disclosure. So that's what I like to rely on. So when I look at cases, I want to really read what the evidence is on scene, put all the other stuff out, and then you can kind of make a determination on what you believe happened in some of the cases you were talking about. But with experience, you'd be surprised how quickly you can get to that point where you're like, yes, this is almost 100% likely the suspect, or it's not. You can quickly
Yeah,
eliminate the individual too.
yeah, yeah. It's well, there is certainly something to be said for experience. Experience is the great teacher, and sadly, we live in a world where there's ample experience out there if you want to find it. There's always somebody out there that's willing to do something terrible to move themselves forward, and whatever that is.
Yeah, very true.
I think that there have been some interesting things that have come out as of lately. I've got some friends that have written some books, and trying to focus on understanding and trying to demystify some of these things. Um, but I see very little validity in some of those. I think a lot of times, especially within the true crime community, we get a lot of our definitions crossed. Uh, you know, you mentioned earlier serial killers. They kill multiple times. There is typically a cooling off period. Spree killers will kill in one instance, maybe 4 or 5 people at one time. Um, and then you have different motivations for killing, and those change the style of killing as well. If it's motivated by money, or by you have a lot of organized crime, which is, I would not classify as a serial killer, even though they may have killed multiple people at different times, because their motivations are very, very different from that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wouldn't classify organized crime, even spree killings. If they killed more than 4, I wouldn't classify it as a serial killer. Serial killers they're think of them as predators, continuous and in
Yeah,
perpetuity. That's a serial killer that looks for victims, whether a cooling off period or not. They never stop ever. Spree killing might stop, right? Serial killers are unique, so I agree with you on that. And I think the book covers a lot on serial killers. In some of their deviants, has a lot of references, a lot of cases like Dahmer and Ted Bundy. They can all be similar. The ones I interviewed, which I found always interesting, was that they always wanted their own ego. They didn't want to be compared to Dahmer or Bundy. They wanted to be compared to themselves on how great of a killer they were. So it's highly ego driven with them. And so in an interrogation, you would play on that. I mean, as odd as it seems, you would tell them what a great killer they were, and then they'd spill more and more stuff. So it's kind of in a negotiator, interrogator, you almost have to befriend somebody, compliment them on these heinous crimes to get to the end confession that you want.
yeah.
But you play heavily on their ego, and it works very well.
One of the things that I sent a picture to Dennis Rader, a photo of the cover of my book, and of course, Dennis is on the cover right next to H. Holmes. And he sent me a message back, and he said, "Thanks. You put me next to my idol." And H. Holmes was the one that he was always studying and fascinated by, and I did not do that on purpose. It was not me. It was the publisher that designed the cover. My buddy did do the illustrations, but but like we had nothing to do with the cover itself. But I for sure took credit for that. I was like, "Oh, thanks." The
Yeah.
weirdest conversation I had with him is my friend is like his surrogate daughter. She was the one that went and visited him in prison after his whole family left him, and everything. And so she would go and visit him. And so I told her after the book came out, I was like, I want you to let Dennis hear this because she talks to him on the phone several times a week usually. And so I was like, you got to play this for him. So I read the portion of the book where one of the myths in there that I talk about is that Dennis loved to kill. And I don't think that he loved to kill. And we had a brief conversation about it. I think he loved the control. I think he loved the control of the situation. He loved to control the people, and I think that that's what really got him off is having that control and that stalking. And so I read an excerpt from the book where I illustrate that and I talk about that, and and like she plays it for him, and Dennis says, "Yeah, I think you got it right on. That's exactly how I feel." And I was like, "That's a fucking weird feeling to have that confirmed."
It would be. I think we put you at the Anchorage Police Department, Jeff. We'll give you an investigator job. You get some work done here. I like it.
I'm down. It was really funny. Like another strange moment between me and Dennis. Like I mentioned, I had two strokes, and so I messaged him one time and I said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I probably won't be able to talk for a little while. I've been busy recovering from the strokes that I had." And he messaged me back and he said, "Oh man, he's been in the hospital ward for the last year because he fell and broke his femur. And so he's been living in the hospital ward for some time." And he said, "They believe that that's what happened to me, that I had a stroke and I fell because I was off balance and I broke my femur." And so, like, he's commiserating with me about having strokes and losing our balance. And I'm just like, this is a fucking weird thing to have in common with a guy that killed 10 different people. You know, it was,
That is weird. And I've never talked to him, but I know serial killers in interviews, they try and build rapport with
oh, yeah.
cops or you as well. So he's probably very keen on playing that for trying to manipulate, saying we have something in common. I don't know this case because I don't know him, but I've had that with suspects interviewing with me where they key on that and then try and manipulate you. That's that chess game you play as an interrogator, negotiator, back and forth. And you have to be very keen on that because you can fall into that really easy. And like I said, that goes back to their intelligence. They're always looking for an angle as a serial killer and other criminals too.
Oh yeah, for sure. When I was working in the jail and when I was there, I always had a very good rapport with the inmates that I was watching over. And there was one day I went in there, and there was I got in. I think I was first shift that day, and I got in there and I saw people standing on one side of the room, people standing on the other side of the room, staring at each other, and I thought, oh shit, there's something bad that's going to happen today.
Yeah.
And there was a race thing that was going on in the pod that I was in. And so I got there and I thought, man, this is going to be bad. The guy left. The other officer that was there before me left. And I'm sitting in this dorm and I've got 64 inmates to one guy. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, this could be a really, really bad day for me. So I walked around and I talked to the heads of the different factions. And I was like, hey, listen, I know you guys. I really don't give a shit what you do today. Like, go work out, go to sleep, whatever you want to do. But I get off at 3 o'clock, and I'd like to go home
Yeah.
and not have to deal with this. So if you guys could chill out this morning and give me that, it would be greatly appreciated. And they did, thankfully. They didn't do anything, but about a half hour after I left, it all went down. And I was
Well,
like, I'm glad you guys respected me enough to leave me the hell alone.
yeah, and obviously they did. I would not like to be one on one with 67 inmates. It'd be an odd feeling for sure. So that's a dangerous situation.
Yeah, I had a couple guys in there, and I was I was glad that, at the time I was actively fighting and training and everything. And I would regularly have some of the officers over at my house and we would train in the garage. And of course, one of the big farm boys would come over, and he went into work the next day and had a black eye. And, everybody's like, man, what happened to you? And they're like, man, you don't want to fuck around with Ignatowski. And of course, I had to tell them that, yeah, I gave him a black eye, but he also threw me through my kitchen wall.
Yep.
Like he's a big boy, man. Like it's legit. But it gave me a lot of credit, a lot of street cred when I was in there. And for the most part, they left me alone because they heard all the stories. And it's fascinating to be able to do that. But I grew up right outside of Philadelphia. I grew up in the street, so I understand how far that reputation can take you,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
putting that out there, uh, you know. And then I would, because I was a boxer and everything, there were plenty of times that the old boxer would get into the bathroom and shadow boxing or whatever, and I'd go in there and say, "Well, let's go. We can shadow, we can box in here. I ain't scared." Because you can't show any fear in there.
No.
And they would, they'd eventually back down, but I would have done it probably to my detriment. But I'd have had fun for about 3 seconds.
Yeah, as a young cop, I learned you couldn't fight the world. So really, communicating, talking somebody down was very important. And then for the MMA guys like you, later on in my career, the taser was a great weapon because
Oh
nobody
yeah,
likes to be tased, and the more muscle you are, the harder it hurts because it seizes up. So that was a great tool. That way, you don't permanently injure anybody.
yeah,
But in my experience, they all gave up from the taser. They didn't want to get tased. So that was an invaluable weapon that we had at our disposal, and it kept me safe too because some of these guys can fight, as you know,
yeah,
and if you're not at that skill level, you're going to be in trouble real quick.
yeah, for sure. Cool, man. Well, tell everybody how they can find your book.
Yeah, the book 50 Shades of True Crime. You can go to my website, dougfifer.com. You can watch the book trailer. It's on Amazon. It's on audio, ebook, paperback, hardback, Barnes and Nobles. Wherever you can buy books, you can buy this book.
Nice.
Extremely popular. I'd say that my genre, women 30 to 60 overwhelmingly buy my book. Again, it's all about real Alaska cases, focused on sexual deviancy. Talks a little bit about the state, but if it's a different twist on true crime, it's not going to be your normal true crime. It's come straight from the cop's mouth. I don't leave anything out. So pretty hardcore, but very interesting.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Cool, man. Well, I am super excited. We will have to get back on here at some other time because I would love to talk to you more and hear more stories.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
I will talk to you soon. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us for another episode of True Crime Myths, Legends, and More. I will catch you on the next one. Make sure you check out Doug's book, 50 Shades of True Crime, and let us know what you think. And we will talk to you soon.